Hello and welcome everyone. I hope you hear me well. We're waiting until the waiting room still fills up a little bit. Maybe can someone let me know if you hear me loud and clear?
Hearing you loud and
Amazing. You're very, very welcome. I'm super excited to see you all. We're already 30 people. I want to start by welcoming. My name is Matthias. I'm one of the co-founders at Startup. We've been working with universities across East Africa for now 8 years, partnerships with more than 30 universities. So this is a super important and often solicited topic, and I hope we will have a very good conversation and discussion. So that's really the purpose of today, to dive into the topic of IP, and especially for the purpose of University Hub Managers. So you're very, very welcome. And I would like to use the chat room so that you can introduce yourselves. And if you want, you can share an expectation to take away. You can just share your name, which university you work at, and what your role is, especially in supporting student entrepreneurs at the universities. Super excited to hear from you. So as we're hearing from you, I already want to jump in for the sake of time. There is a few key things that we want to achieve, but really it's about giving a perspective on IP from working with many universities, but of course also thousands of students that we have seen important. So we'll have a little bit of understanding about the topic of IP and its value for you. And I think to jump right in, I will start the presentation. So some things we will talk about today is why you should care about IP. It might seem obvious, but maybe it's not that obvious. We will talk about IP in the university context. As I said, we have a lot of experience around this topic. And we'll have an intro and 4 key forms of IP. We'll also talk about IP ownership and the monetization of IP. If we have time, I can actually add this to the agenda. We will also talk about forms of protecting IP that are non-legal. So not going the legal route. As we are waiting for some introductions, you're all very, very welcome. I already see my colleagues from Moon University. Geoffrey, you're welcome. Aston from UCU, met many years back. Very good to meet you. And Gerard Kizangala from Soroti, super good to meet you as well. Looking forward to working with you soon. Gladys from Moy University, you're very, very welcome as well. We have some AI assistants that are quite active in the chat. Can we disable them somehow? It's okay if they take notes, but can we disable them to chat? Okay, from Fundibots, you're welcome as well. That's amazing to see. From Kyoto University, we're happy to work with you right now as well. Super good. Uganda Matters. I see we have amazing attendance here. So thanks so much for coming. So I want to start with a question really. And that is why you should care about IP, especially as a university hub manager. So I would love to hear from a few people. If you want, you can just unmute yourselves. You can either put in the chat if you're not able to speak, or just raise your hand, use the raising hand function, and then you can share why you should care and why it's important for you and for your institutions as well. We get more introductions. Amazing to have you. Khadija from UDSM. Exciting to have you. Dorothy as well. So do we have someone who wants to share about this question?
Thank you.
Yes, do we have anyone?
Yes, I can share.
Sure.
Because actually this was one of the issues we were discussing at a panel session as well yesterday, as we are having our research and innovations week. I think in our settings at the university, one of the issues is that we are publishing our work. This is part of our currency as academia. We were having this exhibition happening. It just ended today. But why we should care about IP is that as we are doing that part of our work, which is partly expected, but also we are eroding the prior work requirements on the side of IP. And yet what we are creating and all has a lot of potential for harnessing of IP for the betterment of for the initiator themselves, typically the students in this case, or even the university as large, because most universities have some percentages of how they go about sharing this. So I think we need to care about IP so that yes, we can have all this exposure and everything we'd like to have for our students, for our work and all, without losing out on the opportunities for IP. Thank you.
Amazing, Dorothy. Thank you so much for sharing it. That's super helpful, and I agree. I mean, there's a big reputational part also for the universities. Thank you for sharing. Do we have any other voices on this question? Why should you or why do you care about IP as a university, as an individual? Do we have anyone else? Don't be shy. I think it's good to hear from other colleagues as well. So it's hard to have everyone introduced, but let's hear from some more. Yes, Asterlinks Uganda. The exact personal name, but you can unmute and share.
Hello.
Welcome. Yes, we hear you.
Yeah, this is Aston from Uganda Christian University.
Wonderful.
Oh, I hope you can hear me.
Loud and clear. It's perfect. You can go ahead.
All right, wonderful. I think why we need to care about IP, there are many works and many innovations that come up. And if we don't care about them, if we don't recognize them, if we don't isolate them and maybe go ahead to have them registered, then we are even losing out on the commercial part, because I think whereas we are talking about innovation and encouraging people to be innovative, I think IP is a key component when it comes to commercializations and also ensuring financial sustainability for any innovation hub. So that's why I think we need to care about it. Thank you.
So to get you right, you're saying that for it has a component in generating future revenues for the innovation hub. Is that correct?
Yes, please. Yes, please.
Could you explain that a bit better? How exactly would you make money of IP of student innovations, for example, or is it only of researchers? Could you give us a bit more context?
Okay, thank you, Matthias. I would take an example. I think from the previous training that we had with the East African community and GIZ, I think many things were emphasized. But talking about innovation, there are some innovations that are IP based, or they have got some intellectual property. And by intellectual property, I'm sure you'll be enlightening us more about them. But talking about, for example, patent and many others, if an innovation or any product that a student has come up or research, then it is important that you signal out that element that you may need to patent. And the moment you patent it, then it gives you a chance to benefit from it in terms of raising capital and raising finances for continuity as an individual, but also once the hub has supported this student, then we can get into issues of, can we, for example, do venture funding or venture sharing, that if we have supported you with training or financing you, so what does it mean if we start getting money? Can we share some loyalties? So that's how I feel and think that IP can help. Thank you.
Amazing, thank you. We have a lot of big words in the IP space already. We've heard patents, we have heard royalties, we've heard venture funding, you've heard sharing proceedings of a venture in some way. So let's dive in, I would say, and shed some more light on some of these issues. So I clustered some arguments here. Number one is, for example, relevance. And I think this is sometimes overlooked. If your university has helped or had researchers or students gain patents or other relevant IP, that actually brings a lot of positive reputation to your university, which is very important. Then the success of spin-offs, that comes from an impact perspective especially, but the university can have impact by helping students succeed. If you mentioned financing, this is when it's very reasonable as well to even possibly get shared in ventures, right? If you actually invest in these businesses, then this success can even be monetized. Then industry interest, IP of student businesses shows more relevance of the universities to industries. And I think this is very important. There has been long ongoing conversations about academia industry collaboration. And industry sometimes says academia is too far away from what we need. And actually having relevant IP that that the industry wants is one way to build stronger industry relations for your particular university. General reputation, I think if there is venture success and strong IP and technology that comes out of the universities, that definitely helps with the reputation, even to gain more students and so on. But also for research funding. Having an IP portfolio can be really beneficial for research funding applications. One aspect of monetization was mentioned by Aston. Thank you. It's a very controversial topic still, I think, but it's also a good one that could be added here. One needs to be a bit careful. And I want to, in a way, jump on this IP ownership topic first before I go into the details and when we learn a bit more about different types of IP, etc. So I have these three questions here for you. When and what IP should be owned by a researcher, by a student, and by the university? And these are very different questions, right? The relationships are different. A student pays school fees. A researcher gets paid by the university. The university provides infrastructure and reputation or support services through the work that you do with the university hubs. So I want to hear from some of you. Maybe we can have 1-2 people on each of these aspects. So what do you think? When and what IP should be owned by a researcher, a student, or a university? You can pick one and in very short time share your key thoughts. So maybe your answer is none, or maybe your answer is all of it. So I would love to get some thoughts on this. We have Alan who has a hand raised, so please you can go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Matthias. I think for me, I'll handle the one for the university, where the university deploys most of the resources. Then I think largely it owns the IP. But also this depends on the university's IP policy, because for some policies, they say that a student will perhaps get maybe 20%, or the researcher will get 10%. So depending on the IP regime of the university, but largely where the resources are from the university, then the university largely owns the IP. But again, the regime matters. Thank you.
Amazing. That's a really good one. And maybe to clarify, I didn't mean, of course, you're very right. Finally, it's governed by the IP policies of the universities, right? So the easy answer would be whatever the policy says. I'm interested in your personal opinions. What's the fair way? Maybe some of you have been students or researchers or have reflected about it. So that's really what I'm after. But your answer is amazing. Of course, it's governed by the IP policies of the universities. And I think you made a really, really good point. It depends on the level of resources that the university puts in. Our colleague Aston from the UCU in Uganda here has already mentioned the example of investing in a company. Of course, that could come, depending on the deal, with a certain level of ownership of the IP. Super. Do we have someone else who wants to share? Thank you so much, Alan. We have, I don't know the exact name, VKN, OKN. I don't know the exact name, but you could unmute. And after that, we have Gerald Kizangala as well.
Thank you so much. I'm from Open University of Kenya. And my position would be that this particular ownership of IP has to be distributed among the initiator, who is the student, the university, and actually the researcher. Because for the students to be able to come up with the initiative, it must be mentored by the university through research and the lecturers or the facilitators and university facilities. So my position would be, it is proper for to apportion some percentage of ownership to these three entities. Actually, the true name is Professor Violet Opata. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. Super helpful. I think we can move on to the next submission from Gerald Kizangala. You can unmute, yeah. And you're still muted. You can unmute first. Now we hear you. Yes. Mr. Gerald. Okay, maybe there's an issue with the mic. We heard a hoot in the background only. Do we have anyone else who would take a shot at the question? Okay. We have one more. Let me see. We have several pages here. Hortensia, you have unmuted. Do you want to share something? Hortensia. Okay, it's muted again. We now heard Nelson. You're unmuted. Do you want to share something?
No.
Okay. Super. We have a comment from Gladys. IP for self. No previous. Oh yes, Gerald. Mr. Kizangala, you can go now. We hear you now loud and clear.
Thank you very much. There was a glitch with my microphone. My name is Gerald. I work with Soroti University in the ICT Innovations Hub. I want to take on the response for when and what IP should be owned by the researcher. The IP that should be owned by the researcher, the what section of this would be the scholarly works, which is done by the researcher, such as the personal projects work, scholarly papers, and then non-funded innovations that are not necessarily funded by the university. It can be funded by external entity or private. That is what can be the copyrights for such works like publications, books, can be owned by the researcher. And when would possibly be if the kind of research or the output that the researcher is conducting is not funded by the university, it becomes the researcher's property, and therefore they have the willpower to secure an intellectual property for it. Thank you.
Amazing, thank you. That's an interesting submission, and it's interesting. We'll get why it's interesting. So I want to hear some more voices about this. So basically, what he's saying is that if you and you might, some of you might be researchers or have been doing research. If you get external funding, so it's not the university funding your research, then the submission is that any copyright, for example, should be fully owned by the researcher. Do we have anyone who disagrees with that? Maybe from your perspective as a researcher, or also someone who agrees with you? We have Dr. Bernard. Anthony, you can maybe comment on this.
Okay. Are we there?
Yep. We
I
hear
guess
you.
you're hearing me, right? Are you hearing me?
Yes, loud and clear. You can go.
Okay, that's okay. Sorry, I was trying to send a message by way of introducing myself. Well, unfortunately, my message box is not active. Okay, my name Dr. Bernard. I'm the Manager Innovation from Kampala International University. Right. So I appreciate you for accepting me here. Now, on the issue of IP, based on the fundamental questions that are currently ongoing, you know, for you to be a student or a researcher of a university, in the first place, the university owns some of the activities that surrounds you. And that is, I'm trying to give my own view on IP.
Yeah.
Now, the university owns everything that surrounds you because one, the innovation that's coming out of you is based on the address, the identity of the university. Now, the description of whatever address you are using, you know, for such innovation, you know, is based on the address of the university. So as such, I expect that the university should have a role to play, and you as a researcher or the innovator will also have a role to play. So in this case, when it becomes the IP, I think I see 50-50 on the part of the university and on the part of the researcher or the innovator. Like what my earlier scholar said, you know, it looks at the contribution of university to the innovation, right? In this case, I want to support some of his views that when the university contributes to such innovation, I think the university can as well have 60-40. Meaning the scholar can have 40% while the university have 60%, because one, the university contributed to it, sponsored it all through. Now, in the case where it belongs to the innovator outrightly, the innovator got the fund, he has everything it takes, I think 50-50. That is my own opinion on the IP, because the university have a role, why the researcher also have a role. So absolutely, the researcher cannot take the total position of the IP. That is my humble submission. Thank you.
Amazing, thank you so much. I think, could you mention some more specifics for a student innovator? You mentioned very specific numbers for lecturer researchers. Do you have any thought on this?
Yeah, no, I'm specifically looking at even the students. Now, the students cannot be students without the identity of the university in the first place, right? The student cannot be student without the identity of the university. He must be a student of a particular university for to come up with such innovation. So the same thing that goes with the lecturers or the innovators, you know, should also go with the student. And two, you know, the students on their own cannot be innovative without guidance and counseling. That is one of my view. And now, if there are guidance and counseling, it means this guidance and counseling unit also support the student innovations are part of the university. So if the, why I'm looking at 50-50, whether student or not student, or 40-60 to the university, if the university sponsor, right, whether student or not student, is to find a way of encouraging the innovators so that innovation from university can be more encouraged. Because if the innovators, whether students or scholars or the lecturers or whatsoever, are not encouraged in terms of the IP, I think it will further discourage invention and innovation within the university. That is my position on this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Let's hear from Dorothy and then Alan Bryan, and then we move on actually with the presentation. So I think Dorothy is on hold right now. Alan, do you want to take the next shot and we wait for Dorothy to come back first?
Yeah, sure. This gets tricky, and I've seen this in our university setting. So we have had institutions that come in with funding, and they are funding a specific innovation. So when they come in with funding, the university selects specific researchers to undertake the funding. To undertake the research. And because it's fully funded by certain organizations, some organizations are interested in the end product, some are interested in the patents. So in that case, it becomes tricky to say, to decide if the researcher has any rights to the IP, because everything is funded by the university. But then you're also thinking about their intellectual input and maybe their time. So that's, I thought as we go along, I would really like to hear your take on that, or the take of other people. I thought I could just throw that in there. Then concerning the student, I think the student, like any other researcher, really, I feel like they are contributing their time, they are contributing their energies, their mind. So again, I feel like it would be the same as any other researcher, depending on the conditions under which they came to whatever research is being done. Yeah, I thought the research and the student, in many ways, for me, at least according to our intellectual property policy at UMO, they are mostly the same. Yeah, that's my input. Thank you.
Interesting, super good. And yes, I will be happy to give my opinion a bit later. I think we heard some super interesting positions. One of them was that even for researchers, if they bring their own funding in, for example, then they should own it 100%. We have heard opinions that the university should own all of it in some cases when they put in all the resources and someone is employed, but even for students that are even paying school fees. So I think we have the whole spectrum. And this is why I said, let's think outside the university policies, because it's not so easy. I will share a little bit, not so much data and numbers, but there is also research on how international universities do that, right? Like this problem has been also resolved by so many universities. It's a bit more a younger topic here in East Africa from what we've seen, because the IP commercialization space is not as old. I think we have two more submissions. I can give you like half a minute each, and then we move on, and I'll not take more. Rachel, you were next, and then we have Mukureva as well. Madam Rachel, do you want to go next? Don't hear you yet. We don't hear you. You can try to work on your mic. You're unmuted, but we don't hear you. Maybe we can move to the next participant, Bogureba. Sorry if I pronounced that wrongly. You can go next.
Sorry about that. I had a challenge with my connection, but I'll go next. Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Thank you very much. That's okay. Just thought I should just throw my idea here. I thought that in terms of sharing who ownership, that should be guided by one, the funding authorities the researcher has signed with the funder in consultation with the agreement of the university, such that at the time of the signing of that agreement, then that has been harmonized, so that you don't wait to a level of when the product is already developed that then you discuss the IP ownership. So you harmonize that at the start. Then in terms of the student who belongs to the university, I know that for us, for instance, at Uganda Christian University, where I work, our IP policy is that unless the researcher or the student has interest which has been expressed in writing, then all IP belongs to the university. But if the researcher or then this, if the researcher is the student or is just a staff member, then they can discuss ownership, and that's where then the policy would kind of guide. Is it 50%? Is it 20% to the university and 80% to the researcher? Is it 50-50? So then you can have a conversation. I thought I should also bring that perspective. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And I think we had Dorothy, you have come back. We can hear you last because I think you were not able to speak before, and then we move on. If you can hear us now, otherwise we will just move on.
Yes, I can speak now.
Yeah, please do. Welcome.
Yes. Yes, certainly we have to align with the policies that our universities have. The issue is whether the funding was from the university or whether the funding is from an external partner. The fact that you were at that university gave some credibility to one in order to attract that grant. So I think it's just then the issue of percentages that one gets into. Also the likely supports that you got from maybe university faculty or the technicians or the equipment. So I think sometimes it's difficult, even if you say this was something I got on my own and all that, to use that as a justification. What are my personal thoughts on that? Irrespective of what our bill may say, I think it's only fair that there's some degree of sharing. I'm not going to the numbers on this one, but I think there's a case to be made for that. I think where we sometimes will have an issue is when maybe the partner that puts in the funding has some constraints around how IP would be managed, and if that is in conflict with what a particular university considers, which makes the case, and I think has been shared by another person speaking, that it's good to have sessions like this because IP is an issue that we need to start talking about from the beginning, so that things are clear and everything can then be done above board from that point on. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you. This was a wonderful submission as well, and giving a few perspectives. So I want to move on in this conversation. I want to share a little bit from our perspective about IP ownership, and firstly about student ownership. And this is also basing on global standards. It's almost always the case that students should retain the full IP. So number one, they pay school fees, right? It's a very different relationship than with a researcher. Even one colleague already mentioned if a researcher brings their own money to conduct that research or private funds or their own funder, they should own all of it. So this is really a best practice globally. It's not really a best practice in East Africa from what we've seen in the IP policies. There is more reasons why this might make sense. And the second bullet here is that the universities really want to encourage student entrepreneurship. And here I want to share an anecdote. We've worked, as I said, with over 30 universities in East Africa. We are very close to the student communities. We've interacted with probably 10,000 students. We have seen student communities talking about the IP policies of universities and actively stopping to engage in entrepreneurship. This is happening because they are saying, and some universities have IP policies where the ownership of the university is between 40 and 80%. So basically, the students have no incentive to start anything. So all they say is, okay, let me just focus on my books. I don't want to do anything with entrepreneurship because the university just comes in. I do all the work, I pay school fees, and the university takes my IP. I'm just quoting students here. And I think this is something very, very important to keep in mind and that we wanted to share because we have this strong connection to students as well. And this is something that we've seen at multiple universities where it really can discourage student entrepreneurship if the university thinks of taking IP ownership rights maybe where it's not justified. Of course, there's places where it's very justified. So I just want to mention this as a statement that it's very important to reflect this and to be a bit critical about it if you want to support student innovators. I will share one more reason why it can be a problem later. And it can even mean that you will never make money out of it because if the student doesn't have an incentive to build a big company, you can also not monetize it, right? Because the university is not going to build the business. So this is a global best practice that if it's just a student who is not employed, not a student, a working student or anything like this, then it is fully with the student. And I think I've seen some universities starting to have these conversations about the IP policies, and this is just food for thought for now. I know we could talk for hours about this. Maybe this is not the right space, but I'm happy to engage also in follow-up conversations if you want to talk more about it. So for researchers and employees, even in the global level, it's a bit different actually. Let me correct. Is the partial owner of the IP, and I think this was mentioned that it's very reasonable that because of the intellectual property and the own work of mind that was put into it, the employee of the university will be a partial owner. And I think it's the employment contracts mostly that would regulate how this IP is split. And I think here also on the global standard, there's different levels. And I think very good and the most important points were mentioned. It depends a bit on the sources of funding. If even the funding for all the research, for the labs, for the infrastructure and so on is given, then it could be almost full IP ownership with the university. And it's really a spectrum. And this depends on a few things. And it is very reasonable that for the researchers that the university owns part of it because the researchers especially couldn't be doing their work without the university. And I think this is
Matt, I think we lost you for a bit. So I think we lost him. I'll be reaching out to him in a bit just to let him know his network dropped. So in the meantime, we can just yes.
Sema. Nakula tena. Nakula tena. Sawa. Kupanda mboga gani?
So I think he
Hello?
had a connection
Think
problem,
my
but he's joining
network.
again. No,
Okay.
Judith. It's the presenter had a few issues with their network, but they're joining us shortly back on again. I just spoke to them.
All right. Thank you so much. We'll be waiting.
Someone give me a signal if I'm audible.
Yes.
Okay, super. I might switch the camera off in case that persists. I'm really sorry for this interruption. Screen share again. So the researcher and employee ownership of IP, and I think the split here is very normal for the researchers, and it really depends on the setup. I think that influence, I think we've heard them. If there is more money from the side of university, of course, the ownership must both for researchers, but also for the students. And if the innovation is directly related to the innovator's work as an employee, right? Even it's not super common, but student employees at the universities as well, the same story. So there is a scale, and I especially wanted to make the point about the student ownership and what we have seen and learned, and that's a very let's say sensitive topic that I think requires a lot of active thinking and strategizing how a university wants to handle that topic in light with how it can influence even how students feel and think about the university. We have seen that at so many of the WhatsApp groups we're in that there's negative sentiment. And also it's just not also the global benchmark on IP ownership for students. Once again, it's very different than for a researcher who gets paid. The student actually already pays the university for providing the infrastructure, the environment in which they can thrive, right? Like they actually pay for such services to be delivered. So the situation is a bit different. I want to shortly give room, especially also in the chat, if you have any comment, or I can take one or two specific questions on this matter, because I know that it's a big one. Madam Dorothy, you can go. The hand went up so fast.
Yes, because this is a subject close to my heart, and I've had a number of discussions around it. I hear the students when they say, hello?
Yes, we hear you.
Develop productivity. That's why you start that's the second quarter. Then you see the no speed now. MPS productivity.
Mr. Christopher, can you mute?
So
otherwise I will disable the mic. Sorry, Dorothy. I think you were about to make a point. Can you go again?
Yes. I think that this is an argument actually that we have debated in other fora. It is true that students pay fees, but number one, if we were genuinely to charge what it costs to take what it takes to get the student from first year to fourth year. I mean, if I speak specifically on our end for engineering, what they're paying is much, much less than what I would call the market rate. Okay, to say that, yes, I've actually paid for everything, so everything comes my way. So that is one thing. And so I always get a little bit quizzy when I see that argument being made, because it can also attract on the other side to say, okay, let's make sure you pay the full fees that you should do. And I see a lot of defaulting on paying of fees. So even as it is high, but it is not comprehensive. Thank you.
Yes, you're very right, of course. I know, and that's interesting where the debate of monetizing IP in the university context comes from, right? It's also about covering the fees, because even for public universities, often what is funded by the state is barely enough to provide top-notch education. So there's a big need to find other ways to it's a very important one. I still think it's beyond the school fees. The points should be noted and are important, and I think especially the conversations that I have with students are important to mention, because finally we're all here because we want to encourage students to build things, right? And yeah, I think that we have two more. We have two more hands up. And I think we can later talk a bit more about how we can actively maybe monetize the support that we give to innovators. Maybe Rachel, and then we have the second hand up, and then we move on. Let's hear those two statements, Madam Rachel. We don't hear you. Madam Rachel, we can't hear. I'm not sure about the name, but VKN, you can go. Okay, you're also not unmuting. So I think I will move on. I think there was a question in the chat that I will then comment on. What happens if someone obtains a fully funded grant using the university's credential, but wants to take ownership of the IP? Could you, Mr. Allen, give more context? Is that a student? Is that a researcher? Who are we talking about here? A researcher. Oh, yeah. I think obtains a fully funded grant. I think still it is, they are employed by the university, right? They were probably even writing that grant application while getting a salary from the university. So I will not share about percentages. I think this is a bit too detailed. We would have to look at so many different things. But definitely, I think the university should have a right to a partial ownership of any intellectual property here. I think that does make sense to me. But it's a case-by-case decision how that should look like, and it depends on the context as well. Are they a full-time employee and researcher at the university? What kind of infrastructure do they have access to? And I think for top researchers, such the individual IP shares and so on are negotiated even on an individual level. But I think this is where strategy comes in. It is about for the university to set a deliberate strategy. This is how we want to do it, because finally you also want to attract the best researchers. There's no sense in taking high IP stakes if the best researchers that can actually generate valuable IP will then never come to you. Or say, okay, I have an idea, but I will not work on it through this university because it's just not worth it for me, right? So it's a give and take. And I already promised that I have another perspective because we have done had some conversations with investors about this topic. And what we have learned is that generally, and this is not for researchers, but this is for students that are not employed at universities, that investors, if they know that universities own significant ownership of the IP, they're very unlikely to invest. And the reason is especially because they just see a much lower incentive of the innovator to actually build that company. And that's all they care for, right? They are giving someone money to build out that company and commercialize it. If they know that the benefit of this will go to the university that will not do the heavy lifting of the commercialization, this is a bad thing for the investor. And most investors, or basically all investors actually that I talked to, saw this very, very critically. This is very different if the university actually invested money, for example, right? Like an investor would do. So that, of course, changes things. But I'm just saying, for someone by virtue of being a student of a certain university, giving up IP rights, not if they have received very relevant support and so on, then it's very different. But just by virtue of them being a student. And the other thing is, of course, if the percentage that the university has is very high, then once again, the incentive is really good would be too low, right? Just imagine a major drug company. They are started out of private means and private capital. If a university has 80% of the rights of this, it would be very hard to see how it would become a major company driven by an entrepreneur. All of the companies basically are, right? So this is a key other component to have in mind when we're thinking, once again, about IP strategy for the university, because as you rightly said, we need to monetize something if we support entrepreneurs, and this is where it gets so tricky. And hence, my big recommendation is monetize support for the very best innovators. Don't monetize every student. On the one hand, you're actually discouraging student innovation. You're making students to stop building out these innovations. But if you give grants, research grants, or commercialization grants, R&D grants, or connect them to capital, or invest, or give very, very tangible support, I'm not talking about to machinery and so on, find reasonable ways. You don't want to take 80% ownership because you kill this business. They will never raise money from an investor, which means you will never see money back because it will not grow into a big business. Reasonable stakes for reasonable and tangible support, and also be more selective. I think I wouldn't often start this at idea stage, but where it becomes interesting is when you see, oh, this idea actually has potential. It's okay to have contracts in place for this case, but secure IP rights in a more success case and after giving tangible support. That is the recommendation that can get, and you will circumvent these big issues that I've mentioned, that you would be discouraging students by taking high IP ownership rights, and that you would discourage investors. Because without those two on board, you will not be able to monetize large innovations. I think this is a key takeaway that I wanted to have today. So I want to open the floor once more before I go into the forms of IP and monetization of these. So are there any questions or comments on this thought and idea?
Hello.
Yes, please, you can go.
Oh, yeah. Good afternoon. This is Rachel. I've been struggling to open my mic. Yeah, so I just wanted to give my view in disagreement with what some colleagues, I think one was Dorothy and then one was from KIU, whereby they were like, a student cannot come up with that innovation without being in the university. And then Dorothy said that when you look at the cost of what the university puts in versus the tuition, me, I would like to disagree and maybe suggest that maybe as universities, we just need to sit down and maybe rethink. Because I see this just like imagine you're a supervisor, you're supervising a student, the student comes up with his research, of course you've guided, but then he's doing the work. But then when it comes to the time of publication, you, the supervisor, you want to be the corresponding author. I'm just seeing the same scenario, which is of course not right. So I think we may need to agree that yes, the student should have the higher ownership right, but then maybe as universities, we just need to sit and rethink. But truly, we shall just keep discouraging. Like you'll see students not bothered about innovations, and so your hub will sit redundant. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the perspective. Super valuable, and happy that you managed to connect fully now. Thank you, Madam Rachel. Do we have any other comments or thoughts on this matter? I know it's a very critical one. Dr. Bernard, you can go again, please.
Yeah, I appreciate you when you say it's a very critical one, right? And so the essence of we being there is for the students. I'm trying to see how the student can make life after the university and to become a sustainable entrepreneur. But when it comes to the issue of IP, I'm being skeptical because, there are universities, like my university, we try as much as possible, that Kampala International University, we try as much as possible to mentor our students. We create forums where students have to understand the importance of being an innovator and become innovative. We do a lot of things, engage them, we mentor them, we provide mentors, who work with them, who guide them to come up with these ideas. Now, universities do this, one, in order to increase the visibility of the university, and at the same time, the ranking capacity of the university, the quality of the university. When students now take absolute rights of the IP, I wonder how it will be. And that is why I continue advocating that it should be a percentage or a ratio of 60-40. If the university sponsors the innovation all through, the university takes 60. If it is more or less the student, then the student take 40. Very, very rarely, the student cannot sponsor innovation. As much as the university is providing the mentors, they also provide the resources, to support the students. So the idea of students taking it absolutely because of school fees, I don't think that should be encouraged, because even most students, they know that some of the school fees are subsidized. And when school fees are subsidized, students grow from 100 level to 400 level or 100 level to 300 level through mentorship and training. I think the universities still have a right to take on the part of the student. I think that is still my take, sir. It's actually a very noble idea, but we have to strike the balance so that the student can be encouraged, while the university as well can be encouraged. Thank you.
Super. I think for the sake of time, I want to give one last comment on this matter and then move on. And I want to encourage once again, I mentioned one thing, that it is a global best practice that universities don't take any share of IP of student innovations. We can take a lot of largely known companies in the world. Let's take Google, for example. It was started by while founders were also still at Stanford. The university didn't have a stake in that, and this is very important to have in mind, that it's a global standard, and there's reasons why this happens. If you are bringing up the school fees, like thousands of people pay school fees, but the relevance of IP is just for a few that build something. So it's not really a good tool to monetize or to increase school fees, so to say, by saying, okay, then we tend to take part of whatever IP is being created. I don't think that's a viable strategy in that regard, and it's just not how universities who have a very successful IP strategy do it. I've not seen it anywhere before I've started to do innovation work here. And one more example that might be interesting is if we think about entrepreneurship hubs that are outside the universities that also do a lot of work, right, to help even our student innovators to move on. We have worked with university students and so on. I have not seen any hub that takes IP in the work of the participants of their programs. If you go to these entrepreneurship hubs, they don't take IP rights, which is very interesting, right? In comparison to the universities, because they could also claim we're playing a key role in the commercialization of these ventures. I think we will not conclude it, and I'm actually really happy that we have a controversial conversation. I think we've heard a few people in the room who are in agreement and even extended this to the researchers. We have heard a few people who rightfully also say that the infrastructure we provide to students is subsidized, so we somehow need to monetize things as a university. And I think it just shows it's a complicated conversation. And we will not conclude it, but I think it's important to keep different best practices in mind, keep the students in mind, and keep the success of the ventures in mind, because no one will earn any money, no matter how much ownership you have. You will not earn any money of this if these innovations don't become successful. So if you enforce policies that will scare away the students from implementing, or that scare away investors, it will be very difficult to monetize. But it's a tricky conversation, and I think it's a case by case, but as was mentioned as well, there needs to be more conversation about this topic, and especially about the student side of things. I think it's a bit more clear-cut for researchers that are even paid by the university. I know there's a lot of things. I think I would love to see them in the chat, and then I can still respond. But for the sake of time, I would like to move on, because I promised you a few more things, and I want to live up to that promise. I want to very shortly now give a short definition. This is by WIPO, the World Intellectual Property Organization, about what intellectual property is. It refers to the creation of the mind, such as inventions, literary and artistic works, designs, symbols, names, images, used in commerce. So that's also important, the commercialization aspect. It's essentially a legal term that refers to the rights given to people over the creations of their minds. So in short, IP is what you or someone has created. With that in mind, we want to separate here, and this is to help us think about in the initial statements. We heard a few of these terms already. Aston from Uganda Christian University mentioned several in his intro comment. So we want to look especially at these four kinds: trade secrets, copyrights, patents, and trademarks. I will explain all of them in a little bit more detail, but not very theoretical, but very visual, so it's very clear what the differences are. So let's look at copyrights first. So these are original works of authorships, mostly literary, dramatic, musical, or certain others. So a good example are song copyrights. That's where we know it from. Spotify sends a lot of money back to the owners of the songs, the copyright owners of certain songs. Okay, so especially for such works of authorship, literary, so text-based, I think there's a lot of copyright conversation right now when it comes to AI, where there's a lot of need for data. So who owns the data, and monetizing these copyrights through that way. Okay, so this is on copyrights. Then we have trademarks. The example here is our own brand of Startup, and for example, the logo. So you can register, you do that with the service bureaus in the different countries, or with the intellectual property organizations, logos, brand names, and other symbols to identify, distinguish your brand, right? You might have seen, of course, fake t-shirts with fake Adidas logos, or with slight differences in spelling. And this is basically to copy the brand name without infringing on the trademark here. But it's really to protect words, symbols, logos, and so on. This is also per target country, right? So when we applied for trademark protection, for example, there is another startup in Europe. We don't have a trademark for a startup in Europe. There's someone who already has that. We didn't get it because we're fully on the ground. We don't even have any staff or anything in Europe, but we couldn't use this name and do marketing in Europe. We're not allowed, right? But for example, in East Africa and a few other countries, we applied and paid for these trademarks. Then on patents, inclusive right over new inventions. So this is where it's about inventions, and it's for a specific time. Usually it's 20 years that most patent applications go for. It could be processes, machines, manufactured items, compositions of matter, but also other things. So it has to be new. It has to be an invention, and there's different categories that can be patented. This is really where where, for example, research commercialization often falls, because it's really this this new approach to doing something. There's an example by a gentleman who worked with the Nelson Mandela African Institute for Science and Technology in Arusha, Tanzania, that developed a water filtration system that was patented. Right, so very often it is hardware-based in drugs, biotechnology. These are the spaces where we see a lot of patents. And lastly, trade secrets. Right, so this is really, for example, a secret recipe that someone is using. Let's take Coca-Cola. I think there's a lot of these myths and stories about how well guarded the actual original Coca-Cola recipe is in some vault with a lot of layers of protection. So I wanted to give those 4 because it helps us think about different types of IP, and I think this is important as a background. That's kind of the theory section. You see, we want to make this very, very practical. That's the biggest part of the theory section. Now, with this in mind, I want to especially talk about patents, because in the university and research context, this is very, very, very important for you, especially, right? So because you're talking about monetization, it is very important to reflect on, okay, we want these IP rights, but how are you actually going to make money off this? Which should be the underlying thoughts behind an IP strategy to monetize. So here for patents, it is actually not an easy way to make money off a patent. Even if you have the ownership rights, that doesn't mean that you earn cash from it, right? So exclusive rights for a limited period, 20 years, which means you need to have reasonable commercialization in that period of time, because afterwards you will not directly benefit from proceedings of that IP. So you can only benefit from it if competitors, or it gives you protection if competitors are not too different. If they're doing something different enough from what you do, for example, if you patented a process and if they achieve a certain outcome through another process, then it could be very difficult to protect yourself at all, and they can just run the same business. So if there is an infringement, then there needs to be a lawsuit. And these are often very lengthy and very expensive. And you even need to first find out that someone is infringing this patent. Why I'm saying this, if we're now thinking about a student who is at university and maybe there is now a patent on an invention, if you think about this, it is very hard to even use a patent to protect this, because who is going to be paying for the lawsuit? So what you already see is that patents are a very defensive tool. If you have commercialization that is very valuable, like a new drug that really has a large market, then you want to do this. But outside that, it's actually not so easy to enforce, because who's going to be paying for this? And arguably, a company in the early stage rather wants to put money into hiring more salespeople than into a lawsuit to protect themselves from someone else using the same invention. Because when you put all that money into legal fees, you still haven't hired your salespeople to actually make money off your invention, right? So what this means is that enforcing patents is actually very, very expensive, and that's why it's usually mostly used for hardware, deep tech, and process inventions that have massive commercialization potential, but also very hard R&D costs, actually. So examples are in drug development, I mentioned it, biotechnologies, deep tech, hardware products that are pretty complex and not easy, because when you have long and costly research and development, and if you have massive commercialization potential, that's when it's worth, only that's when it's worth to really invest this money into that kind of protection. There's a lot of businesses that where this investment into such kind of legal IP protection would not be worth it. I want to make one comment on software. It's almost useless for software, and we could share a link for this afterwards as well. And I'll give you a few examples why this is the case. Even massively adopted inventions in the software space, such as the like button, which came out of a hackathon at Facebook internally, do not have a patent, and you see them everywhere. And it is really, really hard to enforce software patents because there's so many different frameworks, there's so many different ways to achieve a certain goal and a certain product with software. I could use very different code to achieve the same outcome, which means even if you protect your algorithms or whatever it is, I might just easily find another way to achieve the same thing and you're not protected anymore. So it is very, very, very rare that actually software is patented. I'm not saying it's not, and there's especially a lot of design patents on product design, but it is not something that is common, and especially at the early stage for innovators, it's almost never worth it. Also for the same dynamics that we've discussed afterwards, it's just too expensive, and that any capital that's available should not be spent on lawyers, but actually on building that business. That's in almost all the cases. Of course, there is niche cases where this might not be the case, but I think it's very important to understand this dynamic. I want to make another short pause here because now I've rushed through a bit through the theory part and talked about patents. The next aspect of this conversation will be on monetization of IP. So before that, I want to open the room again to you and to to see if there's any questions or comments from you. Yes, Madam Dorothy, you can go again.
Yes, it sounded quiet, so I thought I could share. Yes, I think I just wanted to align with what you have shared. And in fact, donation of software, it's a big challenge also, as you share. And I think we were in some other engagements as well, where even on the hardware side, unless you're doing, as you said, some of these extensive drug and other tests, where patenting may actually not be worth the level of protection you may eventually be able to get out of it. The question then becomes, okay, so what other ways can we have recognition of someone's IP, if not this one? But that's, I guess, is another question altogether. I just thought I would share that as well.
Yeah, and that's an amazing one, right? And it comes back to why are we taking these large shares of IP ownership, right? It comes back to what I said, strategy. What is actually our strategy? And by strategy, I don't mean strategy to own IP, but I mean strategy to monetize, because if you don't monetize and make cash out of it, it's not worth anything, right? So the fights that we should focus on fighting is how do we support innovators, be it researchers or students, to build viable commercial enterprises, and how can we give them such relevant value, for example, funding or access to the infrastructure that they need, whatever it is, that they need to actually become successful and then benefit in their success case. Because anyways, you will only benefit if you bring about successful ventures. So I think instead of mostly thinking about percentages of IP ownership, the biggest question in such a strategic conversation should always be, how are we ensuring large-scale success of the innovator? And then how do we add value to that so that they're even happy to give us a share of the success? And sometimes you might not monetize IP, right? That's maybe directly to your question, Dorothy. If you look at large venture-funded companies, the biggest return for investors doesn't come from the IP. Of course, in like drug development and so on, this is what protects it. But for example, in software companies, the return comes from the revenue that they make from clients. Some products require the IP protection to actually then generate this revenue, but we should be very revenue focused and see how we can then monetize business success. This is also what any investor would do. And this is maybe how some hubs like ourselves that also invest in businesses would monetize. We don't monetize on trainings. All that support is for free. Or when we work with university students, we take zero claim on that. And sometimes we do the very heavy lifting. But if we then invest and add very deliberate and long-term value that the students appreciate, we sign individual contracts. They agree to it, and like this, you build a business partnership where you can be sure that you will monetize later. Is there any other question or comment here? I think I had 2 questions also in the chat, which I don't fully understand, including yours. I don't know, Dorothy, what you meant by clusters, and Christopher, on incubation, you could give a bit more context, maybe in the chat, and we allow one more question. Is there someone else or question or comment? Mr. Joseph, I think. Mr. Joseph Mugabe. You were unmuted at least. You want to share something? Or is there anyone else? Can take one more comment. Super. Otherwise, I'll move on. I hope I didn't keep it too simple, but I think sometimes it's very important to keep it that simple so that it's easy to also keep in mind and on the high level understand what we're talking about. So the next part, and I think this is really where the rubber hits the road, what we've been discussing in some form or shape throughout today. How can you monetize these forms of IP? So we're talking about copyrights, patents, trademarks, and also trade secrets. I did some brainstorming with colleagues, so these are a few things that are pretty typical. So let's start with copyrights. Licensing is one of them, and you will see the same concepts for all kinds of IP, right? IPs are assets, so you can license them out that someone uses them or distributes them. So giving someone else a licensing agreement, right? If you have certain ownership or partial ownership of a copyright, find someone who monetizes it and pays you a license fee for being allowed to do so. And you find the same concept also under patents, right? If you own a patent, you can find someone who can license it to produce from it, right? Then under trademarks, it's the same. And for trade secrets, oops, there's a word somehow missing. I don't know where it got lost. For trade secrets also, but with probably much more care, because of course you don't want to license something out that can be copied. So good protection from it being copied then is key. Why would Coca-Cola give out their trade secret and someone copies it? In some cases it makes no sense at all. In some cases it can make sense. Yeah, it depends also on your monetization strategy for the products that you have, right? For Coca-Cola, it's just that they have built the brand themselves and monetize fully themselves. Selling, and this, of course, you can have that for all the aspects as well. You don't only license it and give someone the right to use it, but you actually give them the ownership of the copyright or patent or whatever it is. For copyrights, we also have royalties, earning income from the use of copyrighted works, such as through music streaming, right? Someone is allowed to stream as long as they share royalties with you. You could also, in the copyright sense, maybe that's a bit more creative, create content around it and generate revenue through ads, subscriptions, sponsorships from the copyrighted content. For trademarks is where franchising comes in. That's where that is pretty interesting, possibly. Let's look at brands such as KFC, Kentucky Fried Chicken, that have recipes and so on, standards, the name, of course, but also standard operating procedures that they give out for, it's a scaling strategy as well, right? Like, okay, we have all this knowledge, it works and so on. How do we get this to be a global business or wide-scale business? So a franchising option could come in. And then, for example, let's think of so many clothing and apparel items that have brand names, right? How many t-shirts or sweaters with Nike on the top have you seen, or other brand names? So of course there's a value in monetizing really trademarks and brand names. And maybe on the patents especially, I think just manufacturing and selling, right? We talked about drugs. So if you build a manufacturing operation and a business around it that just sells the goods, that's how also money could be made. Then one has to see maybe how the IP ownership actually entitles you to a percentage of this, right? Because you're not, by that virtue, owning stakes in the companies, which means you might not be entitled to a revenue share even, depending on the contracts. I think these are the key ones. And I think this slide could be very, very important for you when you think about IP strategy from where you're seated in the institution. Because finally, as I said, there's not much sense in owning IP if you can't monetize it, because finally you want money out of it. So if there's no cash potential, then it's tricky. There might be others, but these are really the key things. So it's very good to think through the whole chain. Okay, we are supporting students to build businesses. How do we benefit from it? In the case they create, for example, something in the creative industry, something artistic, how do you actually benefit from the copyrights? So what, for example, a lot of investors do, because they take ownership stakes in the companies, they help all the investees to raise more money from more investors, but also get exits. So they actively build relationships with companies that could buy the companies where they invested in. What does this mean for you? If you have a strong copyright strategy in a specific field, you might want to very deliberately build assets or resources and relationships around this so that you can help those companies that you're supporting to actually monetize so that you actually earn money. Because otherwise you're just gambling that they will figure it out and that you can somehow earn that money. If you want to be deliberate and strategic, it's much better to really think, okay, which of these different IP forms are we actually monetizing, and how will we monetize them? And then see how can you support the innovators in actually generating cash that will in the end come back to you. Because otherwise you're just doing work, taking ownership and pray. which is not what, for example, the spaces where IP or even ownership in companies is monetized would be doing. I think that's very, very important. And I think a good IP strategy should go way, way, way beyond ownership of IP. It should go to the place of really understanding where the money is finally going to come from. I want to make another pause and open the floor for questions, because maybe there's some specific things regarding how you work as a university hub or a university, and specific questions regarding your monetization strategies or how you could get there. I also would be curious, who has a monetization strategy for the IP that you are taking as a university? Do you know how you intend to monetize it, or how the university is actually doing that? We had a comment by Dorothy. You can have non-monetary benefits from patents, as, for example, reputation. I think that's great. I think we had that in the beginning. I can jump back to this. We had this slide about why you should care, right? There's a bunch of reasons why it is important, especially for reputation. I agree, reputation is the big one here, and fulfilling the mandate of the university, but reputation can help with better connections, more research funding, etc. So thank you, Dorothy, for bringing that up again. Any questions or comments on monetization? Anything? If not, I have, Madam Catherine, we can have your question. And I have one more slide that is very dear to me after this, which I think is super important for all of you as well. Madam Catherine, we could hear from you.
Much for a very good presentation. I'm keenly following. I'm a researcher and I'm interested to know, I realize that the universities have a lot of copyrights in terms of context of publications and all this, but I don't see this transforming to monetization. So as a young researcher, I don't see why should universities focus or put a lot of effort on publications that will not be monetized. Then I also make observation that when it comes to the other three IPs, the universities don't really, very few universities can actually claim IPs for these particular ones. And when it comes to students, if we have, for instance, Innovation Hub, and students probably has discovered or has a machine that is unique and probably the university should benefit, is the student going to take that patent, or is it going to be the student? Thank you.
Amazing, thank you. There might be other good reasons that we haven't talked about why universities have a copyright on that. I think what I always encourage as well is to just find out, go to the relevant places and try to understand, is there a strategy in place? What is the strategy? Because that's how, of course, the institutions can get better. If us that are thinking about these topics are concerned and are asking the right questions and possibly evoke change by saying, okay, can we double down on only this year, because this is really where value is for the university. On the second bit, I mean, we talked about this in the beginning quite a bit about the aspect of who should own the rights to it. I think we've made a number of points, especially for the student side, but also the researchers. And I think there's different opinions. Let's put it like this. The international standard is that students, if they are not employed by the university as a working student and so on, don't or own full IP of anything they build. That's really the gold standard, but universities also do it differently in some cases. And if so, I really, once again, I encourage to really have a clear idea how they are supported and how this would be monetized. I think we have no other raised hands, so I will move on. My last slides, because there is a lot of IP, if we go back to the definition of IP, it goes way beyond these legal forms of IP protection that we talked about, like such as getting a trademark or getting a patent or getting a copyright. So we already said that it can be really hard and costly, especially to enforce such patents. But there's a lot of things that should be encouraged. And I think I've seen a lot of innovators not taking this very seriously, how they can protect their IP, their inventions, and so on, without having to pay money. NDAs are one thing. If the companies that you work with in your hubs go to larger industry partners, why not help them to sign enforceable NDAs where the university is a partner? So you can add a lot of value to these companies, because it's sometimes very hard for a single student to even possibly enforce it. But if the brand of the university is on an NDA, a company will think twice about infringing it. Another one is limiting internal access to key information, right? There's the issue of cybersecurity. Don't make it very easy for someone to figure out how you do certain things, how your production process is running. Don't write it on your website, right? Or don't have it easily accessible to people that shouldn't know about this. This is already a good level of protection. So what are your key unique insights? And then understand which ones they are and protect them from other people. There could be physical security measures to protect key documents. There could be employment contract clauses. We have that in our employment contracts. Non-compete clauses are pretty standard. IP protection and ownership is with the company, for example. This is something that is very standard. If someone is an employee, we talked about researchers being employees of universities. So having the right contracts in place is also a key measure of protection. I think it's very easy to find a more concrete list and, for example, to use large language models and other AI tools to prompt them with very specific cases of companies you work with and what IP protection that is not legal they should consider. But I really wanted to bring this up also for you to always have it in mind. IP protection does not always mean that you need to register a patent or something similar. There's a lot of things that can be done to protect inventions and to protect your innovators without having to pay a dime, just by advising them well on how to safeguard themselves against the most normal risks. Just do a brainstorming. What are the key things that constitute the success of this business? What is really the intellectual property, and what are the risks? So how can we protect ourselves? I think this was super, super important for me to still mention. And with this, I want to get to a final reflection for all of us, because I know that we are through the time. I think we will send a follow-up email with maybe some suggestions from your end, because I feel there's a lot more need for discussion, and we would be happy to host further, maybe deeper discussions about some of the key topics. So you will hear from us. But I also have a key takeaway. What is your takeaway? So what is one thing that you will do research on, that you will try conversations at your institution, where you want to look at the internal policies and where you want to make certain changes? And I would love everyone to either say something or write something in the chat. So what are you going away with today? So please, everyone, take a minute and think about it, put it in the chat or unmute and share with all of us. I would love to hear from as many as possible. We're still 40 people here, so I'm super curious to hear from you. Is there anyone who wants to share with us on microphone?
Hello?
Yes, please, we hear you.
Okay. Yeah, sincerely, taking a good time to listen to this beautiful A very nice presentation, and gives us opportunity to think widely and do our best. I think from what I've gotten today, there is every need for me to conduct a study on the ownership of innovation patenting and how it improves entrepreneurship performance among East African universities. Right, I just drew out this. Reason is because when you said global best practice, it's quite good when an hypothesis is tested. You know that is what is practiced elsewhere. We have to look at the peculiarities of universities in East Africa and see if all these holds, then we can now have reasons where we can possibly draw up policy, innovation patenting policies within our university. It is very good and so interesting that whatever we put down becomes a policy document that our university have to stand with it. Because when it becomes a policy, I think that cannot be changed. And finally, I appreciate majority of the presentations to do with trying to encourage our students, right, to become innovative and how they can patent their innovation and at the same time commercialize their innovation and protect their innovation. So the lesson today is interesting, and I so much appreciate you, and I hope to continue to participate, along line. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing. I much appreciate. I added more questions. I would love to see some in the chat. If you can, please help to answer in the chat. I would really love to get some feedback.
I've tried activating my message line, my chat line. It's not coming up. So that's why I continue.
Okay. Okay, yeah, no, that's perfect. I mean, also for others, for you, we have heard now. If you can chat, you can unmute yourself. That's fine. But I would love to read from some people. I think for some people it's working. We'll look into why that's happening. Maybe it's because of the app that you're using. Any other comments? I added another question on the slide. Any wishes from us? Is there anything we can help you with? Do you have any questions where we could support you? Yeah, happy to hear more voices. Any more takeaways you want to share, please? Okay, we have a comment in the chat. Thank you for the presentation. Take home is that apart from legal protection, but protecting documents and other important details is important to control access. Yes, exactly the last point we just mentioned. Thank you so much. I think we have 3 people who put their hands up. Madam Catherine, is this still from before or you have another comment?
Yeah, my comment is on, I realize that in the universities, we need to introduce policies, especially when it comes to sharing in patent and copyrights and all the IP. So it's important that we recognize the efforts of each person, whether it's the employee or the student of the institution. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Can we get the next raised hand as well? Go in order.
Hello.
Yes, hello.
Yeah, good evening, everyone. I have just a simple, like I joined late, sorry a little bit for that. I don't know if you would be in position to access the presentation and being used for this guide later. Just a kind request, sorry.
Yes, Ronnie from my team, could you please confirm that we have all the email addresses so that we can send a follow-up email also with the recording and the presentation?
Yes, we do have the email addresses and we will be able to share the session recording and the presentation.
Super,
Thank you.
So you can expect those. Wonderful. Elliot.
Okay. Hello.
Yes, hello.
Yes, from student perspectives, is that it's becoming so scary for an innovator or a student to innovate, while the college or the university is taking almost 60% of his innovation. So this is becoming so challenging. I'm a college student at UDSM, and with my experience to some of my colleagues, it's becoming so difficult for students to innovate or to come up with a new invention or an innovation, because we are looking for policies that are IP policies, which are most of them, they take a lot of percent of the innovation from the students. So it's better to focus on your studies, and then maybe you can innovate after college or after graduating. But becoming an innovator or innovating something while you are in school, it's challenging. So maybe the colleges, or there should be updates on the policies, because we have seen examples from different universities. Stanford University, for example, where you mentioned before, Google, innovators were still students before the campus shootout, and Stanford didn't take anything from the innovation, but they still get loyalty and more credibility based on the invention that was Google. So this can be also done in East African University, here in Tanzania, Kenya, Uganda, and other East African countries, where university can update their policies on IP based on students' innovations. Thank you.
Wow, I didn't know we had a student in the room. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you.
Oops, I think I dropped again, but I was just thanking for joining and making the comment. And once again, it's really something we've heard many times from students, that I know several students that were working on amazing innovations and they stopped, or they said, let me wait until I graduate because the university wants to take so much and I will just stop to work. So let's take this seriously. I think this is very important. Otherwise, we might really kill the innovation ecosystem and discourage students to innovate. So I think that's super good. Thanks for the comment, Mr. Elliott. Yes, we will share notes on email that has come out. I think we have one raised hand. Do we want to try again? We couldn't hear you before. Maybe it's just an accident. I'm not sure. They don't hear us. So yeah, I think please, if you have any specific questions and so on, we could still help you. So I think this is the end of today's session. I thank you very much for participating. We will share the email, and I wish you a lovely evening. Wherever you are in East Africa, I'm super happy to have had the attendance from at least 3-4 countries. So this is wonderful, and we'll also see what else we can do. So if you have any requests or wishes from us and how we can support you, or to build forums like this for exchange or other forums of exchange between different universities, just let us know. We'll see what we can do. So have a lovely evening, and it was my pleasure to have this conversation with you. Thank you for participating so actively.
Thank you, everyone. Nice evening.
All the best.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much for attending.
Yeah, thank you so much for the presentation. Wonderful.
You're very welcome.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining. It was my pleasure.
Thank you for wonderful presentation.
Thank you too. Thanks for joining. It's very happy.
Thank you so much, and I will wish to have some contact, because Our students are doing a lot of innovation, and it is a young university, and therefore I would wish to have some contact so that we can be able to link them with the industry to commercialize their innovation. Thank you so much for the wonderful presentation. I'm Violet.
Thank you so much, Violet, for being here and being very active in the call. I put my email address also in the chat for anyone
I can't access the chat, unfortunately.
Let me put it on the screen. I'll put it on the slide, then you can copy it from there.
Thank you, Matthias. It has been a very fruitful conversation from Sort University. Thank you very much for the opportunity. We hope we are going to get more engagements in different categories. Thank you.
You're very welcome. We're actually coming to Soroti very soon. We have some work with your university going on that is just starting together with the Ministry of ICT. So we're very looking forward. Maybe we can meet there.
Yeah, we are welcome. We have so many engagements with the startup, and we are looking for more engagements. People are very vigorous here and willing to innovate. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. We're excited. Thank you so much. Wonderful. I put the email address on screen. That's a quick hack. I hope that helps for anyone who wants to copy it and doesn't have access to the chat. I'll leave it on there, switch the video off, and I wish you a good evening. All the best. Bye-bye.
Bye.